The legislative session is wrapped up in Albany with a flurry of final bills passing. So, what does it all mean for New York farmers? We'll talk about that today on News Bites. Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Ammerman, New York Farm Bureau's Director of Communications. New York Legislature wrapped up its business and went home last week after nearly 6 months of work at the Capitol. As always, a lot of bills wait till the final days to be debated and voted on, and that included several that will have a direct impact on farmers if the governor should sign them. To break it all down, we're joined today by New York Farm Bureau's Director of Public Policy, Jeff Williams. So, Jeff, session has wrapped up. Mm-hmm. Lawmakers have gone home for the year.
Thankfully.
No more work to be done there, at least as we know right now. School just wrapped up as well. So I thought, let's start off. If you had to give this legislative session a grade, what grade would you give it?
I don't think you can sum it up into one grade because there's really 2 seasons of legislative session. The first couple of months are all about the state budget. And we're talking about a $200 billion state budget. And then that was done late this year. So then we had 6-7 weeks at the most to try to cram 869 bills past both houses this session. So give or take a few bills. And so they had to cram a lot of legislation in at the end. And that's why the assembly had to come back. They went late and then had to come back for a couple of days afterwards as well. So long story short, I'm going to give them 2 grades. I would say budget wise, B+, A-. I mean, we did see a minimum wage increase enacted in the budget, but it's relatively minor. I said the guy who doesn't pay people, but still relatively minor, going up to $16 or so over 3 years. We were originally looking at, $21.50 an hour. So that is add on overtime on farms. And then you think about what that would do to the AWARE rate for H-2A workers. That would be really catastrophic. And I think upstate members of both the Senate and the Assembly, really weighed in with that. I think the governor played a large part in moderating that increase because she was concerned about small businesses like farms. So that was good, but still it increased. But that's certainly offset by, a landmark agricultural tax program that was enacted, the refundable investment tax credit. We have been lobbying for that tax credit for decades, saying and making the case that farms, this will spur farm investment because 20% of anything you put into your infrastructure and your farm, you're going to get back in your taxes. If you don't have a taxable liability, you're going to get that money back in a check. So it's really designed to prime the pump for farm investment. Given everything else, minimum wage, farm overtime, things like that, some will argue it's a little bit too little too late, but it's really designed to help farmers better compete here in New York and modernize their infrastructure.
And overall, the budget, most of the programs, they go to support our farms, whether it's on the marketing side, research for cows at Cornell, other programs, was pretty much on target with what it's been as well, which was good.
Yeah. And the only real change is that we've seen a trend over the past couple of years where the governor puts in a lot more money in his executive budget proposal for agriculture, for those programs that you mentioned. Before, we had to scrape by trying to raise all the money through the legislature, through the Senate and the Assembly, adding money in. We didn't have to do this here. It was almost like it was on autopilot. We had some other concerns we needed to, make sure we're funded, like extra money for NICAM, for example, and some extra staff, at Cornell and the labor and workforce development section. But by and large, it was, it wasn't a pilot because I know the Senate and Assembly chairs worked really hard on it. But it's been easier. It was easier this year than many years before.
And certainly going forward, and no doubt our farms and Farm Bureau will continue to make the case on the minimum wage, especially as it's tied to inflation and the impacts that could have further down the road, other ways that state potentially could mitigate those impacts.
Agreed. I mean, we already have a tax credit just for farms, again, that, helps pay for increases in minimum wage that happened in the past. I'm sure that'll be on the radar for future years.
So you gave the budget A-, B+. Looking at the end of session, what kind of grade would you give it?
blah. Is that a grade? C plus, maybe C. There were some bills that they passed that we worked really hard to oppose. For example, the ban on neonicotinoid seed treatments. That bill has been around forever, for at least 3 or 4 years, but it really came to a head this year. And despite really strong lobbying by not only Farm Bureau's public policy staff, but all of our members who showed up at our lobby day in virtual meetings. We even went to New York City to talk about that issue with legislators. And we have a big coalition of other farm partners, and you made a very strong case, I feel, that if you get rid of seed treatments, then farmers are going to be forced to go back to using what they used 25 years ago. And that's not good for the environment. So getting rid of seed treatments to help the environment isn't a particularly good argument. So that was a big hit, because DEC is the one who should be regulating those products, like any other pesticide. EPA does the same thing. To have 2 sponsors of the bill, both from Manhattan, pushing that bill and passing it is sort of a slap in the face to agriculture, and certainly to DEC and their regulatory authorities. So that one stings a bit. We're working really closely with the governor's office to get them all the information they need to make a knowledgeable decision when it comes to vetoing or signing the bill. So we're making a full court press on that. So that was the big one. I mean, there was some other, bills that we support that passed, and both of them deal with solar. One is studying agrivoltaics, which is basically dual siting of agriculture in solar, large scale solar panels. Because if we can do both at the same time and keep the farmland in production, that's best case scenario, especially for a farmer. And the other bill that passed would give, local governments, local communities, including farmers, the ability to better assess solar siting in their towns and their communities, with an eye in some cases, toward agriculture. So, I mean, everyone is so concerned about the loss of farmland to large scale solar, because it's not coming back for at least 30 years, if ever. So we want to make sure we continue to protect our food supply and our farmers' ability to grow, the products they grow.
Yeah. I mean, some farmers have even leased land that they're losing out to solar development. So and taking a stronger look at that is definitely can be very helpful for a farm.
Yeah. You said that absolutely correctly. Definitely.
A couple other bills that may not have received as much attention, but still will have impacts for farms. One is a pesticide ban on wetlands. Another is regulating what are called sea streams, almost like a state version of what we went through with the EPA and the Clean Water Act, and regulating additional waterways beyond the more traditional ones. And these have been vetoed in the past, and I'm sure we'll be continuing to advocate for a veto again this year on these bills.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just sort of banging your head against the wall on an annual basis, right? Now, the sea stream bill has been vetoed at least twice. Basically, it would, mandate DEC have to permit a whole lot more drainage work and ditch work, not just for farms, but for towns and municipalities. These when to clear their ditches, it would, increase permit time by 6 months and 6 to 9 months just to get the permits. And these aren't streams that are particularly beneficial to the state of New York. And so this would be the third veto, and we certainly hope and pretty much expect it to be vetoed, because all the same reasons it was vetoed for 2 years should still hold account today. And the same with applications of pesticides in wetlands, and that goes back to what we talked about with the neonicotinoid bill. That's a DEC issue. It's not a town issue to decide who or where people can spray pesticides, especially if they're in critical areas. And so we're hoping again for a veto, but it's just so silly / frustrating that they keep passing these bills. And even though they've been summarily panned by by 2 governors.
Well, and it's still important for the governor to hear from our members on these issues. And what do you recommend our members do to reach out to the governor's office when it comes to asking for a veto?
Yeah, that kind of grassroots action is what Farm Bureau is really noted for, and it is listened to by the governor's office and the governor herself. They definitely count how many letters come in from people. And so we have and I'm hoping many people who are listening to this know this already, but we have a program on our website. We call it eLobby, but you can basically log in, put your name and address, and you can send an automatic letter to the governor asking her to veto the NeoNIC bill. And we're working on a couple others exactly the 2 bills that we just mentioned. So those will be up as well. So it's www.nyfb.org. You can click on the link there to eLobby.
Very good. Well, now session is out of the way. Now there's some great things to look forward to this summer for New York Farm Bureau. One of those being the New York Farm Bureau Agricultural Summit, which we coming up on August 8th. And you have a big hand in putting that together. What can farmers and our members expect at this great event?
We're building off our first event last year for agricultural leaders to come and learn more about looking into the future. I think across any industry, especially in New York, people tend to look backward and say, wow, wasn't that great? If it only were like that. And this conference this year is more about looking forward and planning for the future and with strategic planning in mind. And so we've crafted the day, and it's going to be a really good day with 3 panels and 1 speaker who will kick it off on strategic planning and what that means and how important strategic planning is for any business, but certainly farms in this business environment. His name is Mike Carter, and he is the Vice President for Strategic Development or Strategic Thinking for Nationwide Insurance, our insurance partner. He's really, really good. And then we're going to build out for 3 panels and help people start thinking about strategic planning for workforce and, who to hire, how to hire, and who is the next generation or the next, talent pool to work on farms. And it's more going to be a surprise because it's not just going to be the same old, Cornell, Skill, Morrisville. It's people who graduate from John Bowne High School because they have the largest FFA program in the state in Queens. It's going to be processors who have apprenticeship programs. And so the idea is to get people to start thinking more and planning for the next generation of workforce. Then we're going to have a great program on marketing and marketing trends and how to capture those trends for your business. And we're going to have a great panel there. I mean, hopefully we're going to have a surprise on that one. So I don't want to spill it yet. And then we're going to have a panel of legislators, state senators. Right now we have Senator Mannion from the Syracuse area, who's a Democrat in the Senate Majority Conference, and Senator George Borrello from Western New York, who's the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee in the Senate. We're still going to get 1 or 2 more panelists from the Senate. And that's going to be strategic planning for advocacy, because you can sit in your workshop, your kitchen, wherever you game plan these things and game plan out a year, 3 or 5 years about what you can do for your farm. But as we can see from this conversation, your business plan is majorly impacted by decisions made in Albany and Washington, D.C. So this panel will be about how to have those tough conversations with legislators that don't have farms in their districts. How to talk about pesticides, how to talk about leaf. What are the tips that those senators do use to connect with their colleagues on those issues, and try to use those and learn more about that from our perspective, so we can use those as well. And the goal is to send every member home with, the kernel of a strategic plan for each of those things, and then the tools to build those out to use in a practical environment. So it's going to be a really cool day.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting. And, we've seen a lot of the panels taking shape, and there's also going to be an opportunity for attendees to network with each other, to sit around the table and have discussions, after these panelists, after they hear this, to try and, spit all their ideas and learn from each other, not just from the panelists, but from the other attendees as well.
Yeah, that was something we started last year. And I think that was the biggest hit of the whole conference is, after each panel to have 15, 20 minutes to sit around and talk, get everyone's reaction at your table to what was said, and then build off that. So you're absolutely right. It's going to be a great day.
So that's coming up on August 8th in Syracuse. And if people register before July 14th, that's $69. Early bird special, $79 afterwards for Farm Bureau members. And
Otherwise known as a steal.
that's right. And you can find information on our website, or you can go to summit.nyfb.org. Again, summit, summit.nyfb.org, and you'll get all the information there as well as how to register. So we look forward to having everybody there. And Jeff, thank you so much for your time. And I know more big things to come over the course of the rest of the year. And then, of course, you'll start right back up again in January with session.
Yep, exactly. And we're going to take a little bit of downtime and then get rolling again.
As a reminder, New York Farm Bureau takes positions in support or opposition of bills based on member-approved public policy. Each year, our 52 county farm bureaus kick off the policy development process in the fall. This is where they bring up issues of concern or an idea that they have that could benefit all of New York agriculture, and then they vote on it at their county meetings, which will then make their way on up to our state annual meeting in December. That's where delegates will vote on the policy positions, yay or nay, and we'll set the policy for the next year. So it really is a true grassroots process that reflects the will of our New York Farm Bureau members. Thanks so much for joining us today on News Bites. We hope you liked this conversation. And if you did, please find and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. And also give a shout out to Seth Moser-Katz for editing today's edition. Until next time, make sure to thank a farmer for all that they do.